Skipster is the guest management platform used by top event teams for everything from guest lists to seating charts and online invitations. If you're looking for next-generation event software that helps deliver perfect guest experiences, head over to Skipster's website. It's Skipster, ZKIPSTER.com to try a free event.
Are you a follower? Okay, so we're gonna be
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Editor-in-Chief Beth Kormanik.
Hi, David.
Hey, Beth. Here we are, another GatherGeeks podcast.
Today we have two guests in one conversation. Carl Winston is the director of the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management at San Diego State University. And Annette Gregg is regional senior vice president of PRA, and she also teaches at the university. We're positioning this as a back-to-school episode, but really this is not just for entry-level professionals. There are some key insights here when it comes to issues that mid-career people face, as well as leaders of events team. And David, you recorded this at MPI's World Education Congress in June, and we'll hear a little bit of that ambient noise in the background. So are you ready for back to school?
I'm ready for back to school. This is the time when you think about what you're going to do. It just reminds you of what happened when you were back in school, and a new world starts.
Then we all sort of reset again.
You reset. You go back to school. You get to buy your pencils and your little. I guess I'm really dating myself by your little box with all your stuff in it.
They still have those.
They do. Okay.
I enjoyed this. It's well positioned with back to school. So let's get into it and take a listen.
Carl, why don't you start with what you're doing, and you are leading a big organization, and how is it going, and how have you seen the sweep of time change what you're doing?
Sure. I'll start with kind of a fun comment, which is I think anybody over 30, 35 in this industry got into it by accident.
Totally.
I call it the accidental industry.
Yeah.
And what's changing now, I run a bachelor's and a master's degree in meeting and event management at San Diego State University, and those people are all in it on purpose. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be a sea change coming in the way the industry runs, because it's no longer this sort of, I was just asked to plan a golf tournament, and all of a sudden I have a $3 million budget for spend, and I'm like a full-time meeting professional. And so I think the landscape is changing enormously, and the skills required are changing.
Yeah, you really need to know what you're talking about.
I think we always have. I think one of the problems the profession's had, and Annette would probably agree with me on this, is that any CFO in a large company thinks that he can run an event. Mm-hmm. But very few event professionals think they could be the CFO. And there's this sort of like perception that the profession isn't really a profession. They're just the sort of party planners, and anybody can put on an event.
What do you think of that?
It's such a good comment, Carl, because one thing that I try to reframe. So also, I'm affiliated with San Diego State, and I manage a certificate program in the College of Extended Studies. So that's working professionals, or the accidental person that maybe she's been in the workplace doing something else for 20 years and she wants to reinvent herself. So it's a compliment to Carl's degree programs. But I try to let them think of it a little differently, like it's project management. And so what that you have maybe been working in a marketing team and you've been a project manager for 20 years, those are absolutely transferable skills, because you've had a multifaceted project, timeline driven, budget driven, measurement driven. And once we reframe it with some bigger picture thinking, then it becomes, okay, actually, yeah, I can't do this. And it's not just party planning. Yes, it's wonderful that we get to be so creative in this industry, but we know there's a business case for meetings and events. And a lot of times, our own meeting and event professionals don't realize that they need to be able to articulate that as well.
So let's go back a little bit in terms of, when do people decide in today's world when they want to be in this industry, and why are they applying for either to change their careers or just doing it as a bachelor's degree?
I can go first. It's all Jennifer Lopez's fault. And
planner.
This is just a fact. And there's been, I blame Hallmark as well. But when we admit 17-year-old young women into a university today that teaches event management, she watched a movie with Jennifer Lopez with her mom. The planner got the guy, and that's their motivation. It's pathetic. It's scary. And we have an obligation to help reprogram her thinking, but that's the point of entry.
And there are some TV shows about high-profile celebrity weddings, and it's a very creative and visually stimulating industry. Those kind of celebrity weddings and marquee events are hard to come by, but that has driven a lot of the interest as well.
The gateway drug is still weddings?
Is pop culture. Absolutely. It's fascinating how interesting weddings are, at least for my students.
But then they get to the point where the wedding and the party planner word is a 4-letter word. So they turn their back on it.
So the analogy is a lot of young men and women who want to become restaurant owners, it's because of celebrity chefs. And I think it's just a reflection of pop culture today, where there's these images of people wanting to enter a profession because of something they saw on television or in a movie.
It's true, and I think we're going to see a lot of younger people coming through that want to be festival runners because of Coachella.
Absolutely.
And how popular the music festival is. It's similar. I think pop culture does drive it.
It's kind of what Watergate did to journalism.
I'd probably,
Interesting,
that's
right?
a great analogy.
Yeah.
But I think what Carl is and his instructors do, and I know we try to do, is like, okay, let's stop the train. Let's not decide what type of events you want to plan. Let's back it up. Let's show you the breadth of this industry and all these different types of live meetings and events. And we really try to open their minds. And so they're only with me 6 weeks. They're with Carl 4 years or 2 years for the masters. I think by the end of that time, few of them actually just want to do wedding planning after that.
Well, it becomes sort of like their eyes get open to it.
Well, not only that, you say to a 20-year-old today, would you like to do the same thing for the next 40 years? Once they realize, like, you're going to do a wedding a week for the next 40 years.
And you have to be a therapist.
Yeah, right. There's nobody's built for that. And when they understand, like Annette works in a destination management company, there's incredible, you can have careers within an organization like that are very stimulating and interesting.
When they enter the business in the early stages, we'll move on to the whole later stage. Do they realize how powerful it is? Or do they, where does the aha moment that when you teach that they realize, oh my God, this is a big deal?
I can speak to the young people that we have. A lot of it occurs at shows like the one we're recording from. When I've got 6 21-year-old students here, and when they walk into a trade show floor, they go into a general session, there's several thousand people there. Yeah. It's eye-popping. And they get to meet people who do jobs they can't even imagine.
Right.
And what I try to do too, whether they're 20-year-olds definitely, but even the older ones that come through my class, I try to just give them something they can relate to. So I talk about the Super Bowl, or I talk about Comic-Con, which is our largest show in San Diego, over 150,000 attendees. That's put on by the meeting and event professional team. And that's what all the complexity of those types of events, then they can say, oh, that's what the power of this industry is.
Do they realize that with the demise of retail, that events are just pop-ups in many cases, and that it is the new way people are?
I'll talk about that. That's fascinating you bring that up, David. So as the DMC, we get a whole lot of variety. It might have been traditionally more of a business meeting, or an exhibitor that's doing an offshoot in activation during a trade show. But now we are seeing more product activations business. It's really fascinating, at least with our Southern California offices. We've gotten a lot of cosmetic companies saying we're going to do a pop-up store in the middle of this park for 2 days, and what can you help us with the attendee experience for that?
Are you seeing more marketers then coming into the classes?
I was just going to say, I think it really stems from event marketing and agencies like George P. Johnson. I don't want to give a commercial, but there's a lot of them like that came at this discipline of event planning from the marketing side. And now you see event planners learning from that and moving into the marketing
and
side.
Vice versa, right?
Oh,
Correct.
Yeah.
It's vice versa.
I think it's a critical crossover.
Agencies suck at execution.
Right. And planners are relentless at it.
I'm saying that, with all eyes wide open.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. Do you agree with that?
Completely agree.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful sort of trend right now that we're all seeing where they're marrying up each other because they're complementary skill sets.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it speaks to what a dynamic and interesting professional set of experiences one can have along their career with all the things you could do, the different organizations you could work for. And
it's so true. And I'm trying to, I'm sure Carl deals with this too, is we're trying to get our folks to not be so myopic. So it is important to master your craft as a meeting and event planner. But if you cannot speak the language of event marketing or business or proper measurement,
well, it's all morphing together.
We need to be able to speak that language.
Right.
Because it's not just about executing a great standoff event.
Right.
The so what is what happened after that event? What is the business results of that event?
So last week I hosted an event on the stage of the New York Times Center, and it was a conclave, a leadership conclave for the event industry, and it was all about strategy and the fact that we are still not taking strategy as seriously as we should. What is your comment on that?
So my comment is really based on a session I did this morning on data-driven event design. What we talk about data-driven event design is driving the organization's results by asking a question, not of yourself as the planner, but of the person who owns the event. Are we doing this as a sales event? Does that mean we're going to try and drive sales?
I mean, you're really asking strategy.
Is it a lower our turnover, employee turnover? Is that the strategy? And having the planner ask that event owner, why are we doing this? And then designing the event from that.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
the people going to be left behind in the next decade are going to be the planners who are just doing logistics.
Absolutely
It's all about
agree.
strategy.
I'll give you a good story on this because we all have heard what gets measured, what gets done. And one of my previous jobs was managing a $13 million trade show conference for a corporation. And our CMO was the internal owner of that. And at the end of this 7-day event, $13 million, 7,000 people, she said, you guys throw one hell of a party. And I said, shame on us if that's our CMO and that's the kudos she gives us. So that immediately, I started looking at how we're measuring and what's the internal story that we're telling our own stakeholders internally. And I looked at our survey, 53 questions we put these attendees through. And of course, most of them were logistics. Now, that is not something my CMO cares about, is if the chicken was any good or how cold the room was. However, that is the survey we're asking. Did you like the opening night band? So we started asking questions about, hey, attendee, did you coming to this conference make you more loyal to the organization? Based on your attendance at this conference, would you word of mouth suggest to another person that they should join this organization? What's your confidence level in the strategy of this organization based on what you heard at this conference? So we had a better story to tell. And then I was able to get more funding for more strategic design of the conference.
So so one of your rules, it sounds like one of the rules that we're going to be proposing here today is change up your surveys and worry about the strategic aspects of the results as opposed to just the logistic aspects.
Absolutely. Because again, what gets measured gets done.
And learn those measurements from your stakeholders.
Right.
Don't dream them up yourself.
Right.
Talk to the person who's the event owner. Hey, Mr. CMO, what's important to you? What behaviors are you trying to drive? Is it new leads? Is it year-on-year sales growth? Is it salespeople
really
retention?
understand.
And then from that, you design your event around, okay, these are the things you told us were important. We built these specific things into our program to make that happen. Yeah. What do you think? And then you need those results after the event.
But so there's also a controversy, and I don't know if you teach any of this. I know IDEO and places like that, they don't believe in surveys; they believe in observational research.
Sure.
Because you're going to get more on either observational research or face-to-face surveys.
Sure, and I believe in all of it. So one thing we beta tested in the same case study I'm telling you about is we beta tested some unique designs to some breakout space. And so we actually worked with Mindspring from Steelcase, and they are all over this, Carl, as you know. And they watched people and how people interacted in the room based on how the room was set up and the furniture and the tactile things that people could play with. People were much more interactive with each other and the colors that were involved. They were much more responsive to the speaker. So the set drove the interaction, and they did all this with just watching behavior in the room.
Well, there's a lot of predictions out there that we're getting closer to where sound and AV and decor is going to be much more behavioral science, neuroscience, and social physics. And that is kind of going to be the new Holy Grail, which you're going to have to teach as courses once you understand it.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting comment because when I think about technology, the one thing I know for certain is it keeps changing. Yeah. And it keeps changing faster and faster and faster.
But it's not necessarily better. Because what are the results? Like, if you understand it from a neuroscience and a behavioral science point of view, like when you do lighting, and lighting, if you touch it to neuroscience, cleanses the palate of the brain for learning, that makes it even more interesting than, oh, this is cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess what I'd comment there is to say, I think if I contemplate the planner of 2025 and the planner of 2035, she'll need to know those things and be current on them, but her boss won't be. And doesn't want to be. Right. And then if you walked into your boss and say, I need to talk about the neuroscience of the way we're laying out this room, I mean, the average CMO is going to glaze over. I mean,
unless you could tie it to purchasing
with
decisions. So if you, I think it might be, I like where you're going, David, and I think the charge might be led by some high-tech planners. So if you're planning Dreamforce and you're talking about buying decisions that are made at Dreamforce, and the way that the room is orchestrated, whether it's light or any of the sensory elements, drive more buying behavior, then a CMO or a CEO will take notice.
Okay, so from the educational, since that's our topic, you think that all of the educational institutions that are teaching events are knowledgeable enough on this future think to teach it? Or are we still so far behind?
I have an unfortunately disappointing response, which is, I think it takes a meeting professional decades to learn his or her craft. And I know when we think about our curriculum at our university, if we took everything that a planner needs to know by the time she makes it to middle or later in her career, it would take 12 or 15 years to teach that to her.
Right.
And we can't do that in a classroom setting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
It could be through partnerships, though, right? So if you think about what I learned just working with MindSpring for those few years, those are about behavioral science and how people digest information and how the brain is ignited. I didn't have that as a meeting professional. I could put on a heck of a trade show, but I needed to partner with the right niche organization, and they were experts in that. Yeah. So it could just be done through partnerships. Maybe a meeting professional can't be all things, but if she finds niche partnerships,
but maybe there's some fundamentals of that, so the thinking starts in a different level. Because right now, that's kind of party planner thinking as opposed to strategic thinking.
Sure, and if you think about it, you're a business leader and a business owner, so you actually look at the financial statements differently than people elsewhere in your organization do.
Right.
It's your money.
Right, exactly.
That's a skill that one doesn't learn necessarily in a college classroom. I could teach somebody, how to add 2 and 2 and how to do the accounting for it, but it doesn't mean they're going to be fantastic at understanding and managing the business.
But don't you, in education though, do you have to sort of model what it's like to be a CEO, or so that they know what to expect, even if they're not going to be perfecting it at that point? I mean, is that...
Well, it's an interesting topic because another trend I feel is that a lot of I don't know if it's the 20-somethings, they are really entrepreneurial. So they'll come into at least the College of Extended Studies course, and half, if not 2/3, want to be their own business owners. So they'll come in, I'm taking this certificate course because I want to own my own event planning company. But they don't know how to price accordingly. They don't know about profitability and margin. They might be able to manage a budget, but not a P&L. So there is a level there's an interest and excitement, but there's a level of business acumen they just haven't been around long enough.
Right. Okay, so let's take it to the next level, where now we've got, people coming into school, you have your programs, you got your certificate program. What kind of training is deficient inside companies? You see this all the time. And then how do you solve that problem? What do you do? What is the answer? So
because we spent 2 years building this new master's degree, by interviewing mid and senior level meeting and event professionals, I kind of have an opinion that's based on a lot of really interesting conversations. The number one gap by far was, in fact, financial. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting. If you talk to a mid-career planner who would like to move up, she's not very good with numbers, and she'll say that. Yeah. And she doesn't want to be good with numbers. So they're
not the financial training is subpar.
Interest or training, yes.
Interest or training.
Yeah. It's the number one gap that we uncovered.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah.
And I would agree. I see that trend also, and I also see. So here's another example of my previous life. I remember coming into this corporation, managing the event team, and we're sitting outside, and my whole team is at the registration desk. No one is inside listening to the CEO's keynote address. And I said, "Why aren't you in there?" And they said, oh, that's not our thing. We're out here running the logistics. And I said, you have got to understand what runs this company, what drives this company. What are the key performance indicators? Because our department is vulnerable if you are not connecting the dots to the work that we do to that.
That's number 2 on my list, is understanding how to speak with the C-suite. It doesn't matter if it's the CFO, the CMO, the CEO. If you can't talk to somebody in the C-suite as a meeting professional, you will be stuck at the logistics level.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get out of it.
And the beauty of being in the event department is you have access that no one ever has to the C-suite. So you can become on a first name basis with them. What also drives me nuts and is when we're having our own conferences and the all the event department doesn't go to any session. They're not learning anything.
Yeah.
And so it just drives me crazy.
It's so strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's just that mentality of breaking them out. It's the mentality of breaking them out of that. Logistics are great, and it's great to be a subject matter expert. However, if you want to move beyond, you have to push yourself in places that you are no longer the subject matter expert in.
Right.
And so you just have to decide, because I think I agree with Carl. A lot of the people that I inherit or I just end up mentoring in my career are the ones that are stuck. They might be a director of X, director of events, director of sales. They're great at subject matter expert, and they don't realize why they are not a contender for the VP slot. They don't have they can't speak the language of business.
Building a memorable experience for your guest means planning every detail right. Skipster is the guest management platform designed to help you create the perfect experience, from impressive online invitations to seamless check-in at the door. Get started at Skipster, spelled ZKIPSTER.com, for a free test event. How does your course get them over the hump, or does it?
Well, mine really doesn't. I mean, my last course, one thing we added for us, we're mostly nuts and bolts, but the last class we added about 12 years ago, and it ends up being almost the most highly rated class, is I just call it professional development. But it's all the things that Carl goes deeply into for his master's class, which is, what's your self-brand? What are your communication skills? How do you manage your own time? Like, if you're always frenetically running around and stressed out, that is not an asset to your career brand. People don't like looking at you like that. So we talk a lot about that. And I only have 6 hours with them. So we're just skimming the surface about professional development skills.
So when we have this blink philosophy. Do you know the students that are going to make it and the ones that are not within a few minutes? Not necessarily a few minutes, but a few interactions?
I refuse to answer. No, I absolutely make bets, and I'm not always right. But there's a certain level of ambition that one can uncover from somebody. If I was going to be critical of a young person or mid-career person in school, it would be that too many of them don't have enough ambition, and they don't understand anybody could be at the top. It's just a matter of working hard and working smart and understanding yourself. And so many of these young people don't have ambition, and it's like, it drives me a little bit crazy that they don't have that visualization of, you could do this.
Are you saying
and I
that?
would
Are you saying
add,
that?
yes, and I would add maybe the flip side of the word ambition. I would use curiosity. Really, to stay professionally curious, ask more questions. I have so many young people that work for me. It's not just an age thing, but I have so many people that work for me, and they just don't ask enough questions. They take it at face value. And so it becomes very transactional instead of, help me understand this. And even just treating yourself as a lifelong learner, that you're always adding to your toolkit, that you are evolving as a professional well into your 40s or 50s.
How do you identify that person? Like, what are the attributes that you see that say, oh, man, this person's a lifetime learner? Like, what should people take from this conversation overhearing? It's the beauty about podcasts. You're listening to a conversation. You can tomorrow start this. This is like immediate learning.
I think absolutely. And I think the first sign for me is when they reach out and they say, hey, I would love 10 minutes of your time to better understand XYZ.
That's really smart.
It's 10 minutes. Why aren't people doing that?
Are you seeing that among the younger students?
I can see the ones who have those traits. Yeah. But I'm so glad Annette said lifelong learning, because that's what it is. Today, less than an hour ago, I learned about something called social physics.
Yeah, exactly. Me too.
I don't know where you learned that from.
And I'm 62 years old. I'm still learning, and I'm still really curious.
I'm 65, and I'm learning every second.
Right. But I think that points to your organization's success, is that curiosity. I think it's a beautiful comment, Annette, because it's the why. It's the why. It's the why.
So I'm going to share this thing that I learned from my boss, Bill Riley, who is the chairman of Primedia, which was the old company that was a $2-3 billion company. And it's kind of fits into what we're saying. That he would say whenever somebody came into his office and gave him an idea that they wanted to do, he would say yes to everything. Say yes to everything. Don't say no right away, because 99% of the people don't come back with follow-up. I don't know if you see that at all in your classes and your students. Wow. And why fight with somebody? Why get their back up before they're going to not do anything anyway? So you can always say no later. And I learned that is the best advice I have ever heard. And I thank Bill, who passed away.
That is absolutely fascinating. I can build on that a little bit by saying I know persistence works.
Right. But you see people that don't do their homework, that don't follow up, that don't do...
There's a very famous quote from a man named Deming who said, if you don't have data, you're just a person with an opinion.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a good idea, then you're even less. So...
Yep. No, and I agree. I think the ones that they may not have the answers, but they're on the journey of finding the answers. Those are ones that I think I want them on my team.
Yeah. So let's go to the broader stroke of education in North America. We're in Canada. It seems to be everywhere now. You guys are in touch with education. MPI is doing education. What is going on that this is becoming such a universal curriculum now?
Sure. I travel the globe looking at how this profession is taught. I spent a lot of time in Asia as well as North America. The traditional hospitality school, which has been a hotel management, restaurant management program, has been overrun with event students. Today, probably 40+% of every hospitality school in the world has young men and women, mostly women, who want to be event planners. And for some reason, they're flocking to hospitality schools. I'm not sure it's exactly the right fit, because as I think about the industry, people like Annette employ hospitality people. They're not hospitality people. And she contracts with them, but they're not the people that are actually meeting professionals. So I find it fascinating that these universities, again, globally, are overrun with event students because they didn't know where else to go. And the universities didn't know how to accommodate them. And I think that's why there are professional development organizations and extension programs, because this doesn't belong anywhere yet. It's really...
So what's going to happen to the people that graduate with these degrees? What jobs are they going to have? Of course, you can't scale events. Like, where are they going to be? Are they going to be in marketing? Are they going to be in trade shows? What's happening to the people? What are their... What are the desires?
It depends,
yeah, they could be. I mean, I think at least for Carl's program, they get such a good cross section. His program is hands-on. It includes an in-person internship, a mandatory internship.
Right.
So you're already giving these students a real life experience before they even graduate. So, and it's not just focused just on hotels. If you choose that program gives you a wide variety. So you're just piquing their interest. So they have plenty of choices.
And I think a lot of it is, where are they located? So I live in San Diego. We're a destination. We don't have a lot of meeting planners.
Right.
We have lots of meeting professionals, but they tend to be on the so-called supplier side, receiving meeting planners. And I explain that to a 20-year-old. It's like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
It's like, well, there's the corporate jobs are in Chicago, or the association jobs are in Washington, D.C. You have to go to those places where the jobs are. And I think that's another thing that the school systems are struggling with, because they're giving a young person a class in something, but they're not connecting it to the industry. There's hotels and restaurants everywhere. But there's not meeting planning jobs.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Where do those jobs get filled?
I was talking to a university recently. It's kind of a funny, brief story. And they said it's in a destination like San Diego, but it wasn't us, that receives a lot of meeting professionals. And they were having trouble placing all their graduates. And I said, what are you doing about it? Because if they don't want to leave your community, and they said, we now have funeral homes recruiting at our campus.
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
Everybody has one.
It's an event. It involves
at one point there were more funeral directors in Congress than any other profession, because they get to know everybody.
Isn't that crazy?
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I think the jobs thing will change. I think, again, for the average person who's not an experienced meeting professional, they come into it, whether they're 18 or changing their career at 35, they don't know the difference between a social event and a business event. They don't know they may not know what an association is.
Right. Absolutely. And there's still not a lot of jobs that are named correctly for art, not that are named succinctly, maybe, because you see production manager or marketing assistant, and that is still involving event coordination. So I teach the students to dive a little deeper into some of these job descriptions.
Well, we call them the hidden planners.
Oh, yeah.
These are hidden planners in every single organization.
Isn't it true?
And some of them are the ones that are just the social people that become, they get thrown the job. Others, I guess, if you're trained and have this skill in marketing now is more important than ever.
Right.
To understand that.
Somebody's planning these things. Yeah.
Yep. How about diversity? Let me tee this up a little bit. I'm chairman of this organization called NVentU, which goes into inner city schools and teaches events as a pathway so these kids do not go to prison. And all of a sudden, they're going to an event and they're saying, oh my God, this world is completely opened wide up. Let's talk a little bit about the diversity in the industry. There's a lot of women. How do you see that as an issue or not an issue, or does it matter?
I think if I'm going to start, 2/3 or more of the event students today are women. It could be in my school. It's 80%.
Right.
What's unfortunate still in the profession is there's not very many Annettes. The leadership is still largely men.
Yeah, that's got to change.
That's an imbalance that's not tolerable and can't last.
Right.
So that's the first chunk. Women have not made it consistently to the C level in event-related organizations.
And why do you think that is, Annette?
Well, a lot of the things we're talking about is really lacking some of the fundamental leadership skills that can take them to that next level. So MPI Women launched this year. MPI's taken a really distinct effort.
You're involved in that in a big way.
And MPI realizes that with an 18,000 person organization, people still want to find their tribe. So what does that look like? It might mean they want to find other Asian Americans, or they might want to find others LGBT that affiliate that way. So we've created at MPI communities, we call them. And one of them is MPI Women, because from my job experience, there are distinct challenges that women can face in business. And so just for example, that task team right now, their 3 outputs this year are going to be tools on how to close the wage gap, tools on fundamentals, tools for leadership development, and then a mentorship program. So those are just 3 things that this task team and communities identified to put tools out there for the MPI women. But I think diversity in general, it is about just having a multitude and variety of voices being heard. So it's one thing to say gender, it's one thing to say sexual preference, or maybe it's a diversity issue between extroverts and introverts. So are we just making sure that everyone involved feels like their voice matters and their voice is heard? And that is just starts with a lot of training, really, and awareness about unconscious bias and how people are being shut out without even knowing it. We have all women at my company. That's not diverse.
Yeah.
We have all type A women. God forbid if you're an introvert, poor thing, at my company. You're going to get stomped out. So it's my job to make sure her voice is heard, even though she might be a little quieter than somebody else.
Yeah.
Another angle to answer your question, I think, is this profession of meetings and events is very receptive to diversity because of low barriers to entry. So you can become a owner tomorrow.
Right.
If I'm from an inner city and I have a less than fortunate upbringing, it's pretty hard for me to accumulate my first $10 million to buy a hotel. Yeah. It's just not going to happen. Right. But I could become a planner in my community tomorrow.
It's not
It's true.
And so I think there's awesome opportunities for this profession to take a leadership role in the case for diversity, because it's so easy to start your own business. You don't have to wait for a large billion-dollar company to become more enlightened. You can just do it yourself.
I always say that the last bastion of the entrepreneur is the trade show business, because you can start a show where the infrastructure is pretty well set with all of the hotels and convention centers and everything else. You can actually get into that in a big way.
Right.
I want to go into a little bit of the concept of the new jobs that are happening in the industry. Now, I believe one of the biggest, and my total opinion in this, I believe that all event organizers need to become collaboration artists because it's about collaboration. And I see a huge gap in facilitation skills, that people are bringing people together, but they're not using the right techniques to create the connections that are smart and that are meaningful.
I love this topic, David. So I remember reading this article, and it could have been Velvet Chainsaw or one of those, but it was such a good it was a reframing that what if events were just frameworks to bringing people together to collaborate instead of this top-down approach. Our traditional approach to these kind of learning environments is we have a professional speaker up on stage talking to an audience, and there's an expert one to many.
Right.
Instead of unlocking 2,500, 3,000 brains like here at WEC, how do we create, you know how in technology they have open source programming? So, hey, let's dump something that's half-baked out there to an audience, and let's have people have at it. And wouldn't that be wonderful if we could become that for the meetings and events world, that our professional associations like MPI become a place where the brains come together and the real magic happens?
I think the future is really about what we talked about a little bit earlier, which is logistics is just the price of entry. Project management is the price of entry. That's like, just understanding the basics.
It's going to be perfect. Let's not worry about it.
If you're going to go anywhere and be part of the future, you have to be on not the cutting edge. You just have to understand to your org chart example, as a planner, you're rarely going to be at the top of the org chart, but you're going to have to get everybody in that org chart to be in a certain place in a certain day or days, behaving in a certain way. And that's a huge skill set.
Yeah, I think that's why the facilitation piece, like my whole point on that is when you look at a group of people, and I know whenever I do an event, I say, okay, it's not about me, it's about you, and have everyone talk to each other. And you're basically, if you're in an audience of 1,000 people, you're creating thousands of conversation points. Yeah. And so I believe that one of the things in the political world that separated the Donald Trumps and the Hillary Clintons was that what Donald Trump did with his rallies were kind of brilliant. It was the same thing that YouTube does with their stars when they meet each other. They become a community. They talk to each other. You go to a Hillary event, and I was trying to get them, I work for them. I was trying to get Hillary to activate the audience and say, okay, there's thousands of people. You talk to each other. And you're going to create all these relationships that you wouldn't have when people gather.
And I think why we don't see that more is because there's a certain amount of courage that takes in the show organizer's view to let go of control. Yeah. And we think, oh boy, what happens if 1,000 people come up with a model that we didn't anticipate or agree with? Yeah. And then what's our value add as show organizers if we're not imparting all of the knowledge?
Yeah, so we're definitely...
there's another angle to it, and it needs... I don't want to pick on Hillary versus Trump because that's too political, but some people are just more charismatic than others. And we saw today, if you sat at the luncheon, there was... 18 performers. Some of them were fantastic because they had charisma, and they could energize that crowd.
Charisma is this. You can't teach charisma, can you?
You can practice it.
You can practice it.
Right.
Do you teach it in school?
We do. We actually. It's funny you ask because one of our competencies that we teach is we call it spirit of optimism, and we try to educate our students that. I'm going to use a little profanity here, forgive me, but shit always goes, shit's going to happen.
Yeah.
And when shit happens in our structured environment in the school, we say to the student, that's fantastic.
Right.
Yeah. Shit just happened. Like, this is such an opportunity for you. How are you going to deal with it?
That's very enlightening, and it's courageous for you to do that.
Yeah, and where I would pick up on that too is I think a core competency that's missing and what's getting in people's ways of progressing in this industry might also just be really powerful and effective public speaking. So the traditional role of a show organizer and event planner is a behind the scenes role. And when it gets time to present to the C-suite why they need more budget or why this was a success, it's completely uncomfortable.
Are you training people for data scientists?
I am not.
Or should you be? Data science is supposed to be the sexy, hot new job in the event industry.
No,
because you're saying without data, what did you say earlier?
You're just somebody with an opinion.
Yeah.
So, but how do you get there? Because data, if they can't do finances, they don't know how to do data.
No, and we actually teach a course in the master's program about data-driven event design. Mm-hmm. We're not teaching that at a bachelor's level because we just don't think a 20-year-old is ready for it.
Right.
In general, though, from the industry point of view, I believe that is
Absolutely.
I
important.
do too. And I think, and data can be really fun. I think that we scare people away because we call it, call it what it is, but really it's attendee insights.
Yeah.
And if you have someone that can interpret all that data and maybe debunk some of the data, it's really fun when you dive in.
It's really interesting.
And I think the planner needs to be of a mind that she can talk to somebody who's a data expert. Like, how do I get the data? Help me get the data. Yeah. She doesn't have to know data science per se, but she needs to know there are data out there.
Right.
So this conversation has been really, really enlightening to me. And it's interesting that both of you are educators in many ways. You have day jobs, some of you. But you're also flexible. You think academics, this is the way it is. And it sounds like the fluidity and the changing in these curriculums are happening every day with at least you guys, as opposed to a lot of people that have a curriculum and they have the textbook and nothing changes.
In our case, I can say that, having MPI as our partner helped a lot in developing the curricula, because it wasn't just an academic exercise where, what do you think? I don't know. What do you think? Yeah. Like, we went out and validated with real live people. Yeah. Here's where the competencies are. Here's the gaps.
That's great.
Yeah. And I think it's our obligation as educators and anyone that's involved with putting on things like WEC that we do understand the neuroscience behind learning. Yeah. We all know at this table that straight lecture is the least effective way to have information stick. And I know just the trend I've seen in the certificate program is they want to get out of the classroom at San Diego State. They want us to take them on site to a hotel and have them walk, even physically walking while we're lecturing is going to help the information stick better than having them sit. And so we have to get more clever in how we deliver content and how we deliver this information.
Yeah. Are you listening? This is the last question, I promise. Mm-hmm. So are you listening to these young people that are coming on who have some experience and they say, what we do at our events and meetings suck? Are they saying that, or are they just accepting it if they have some knowledge?
That's a really tough question, because I think, I'll give you another sort of sad statement I tell my kids when they graduate, which is, again, my customer's 21 years old when she graduates, and I literally say to them, okay, now that you've finished, we've taught you how to think, we've taught you how to problem solve, taught you how to use data, we've taught you these things. I want you to go to work and forget everything we taught you for a year and walk up to your boss and her boss and the other people in the organization and say, what do you want me to do? And then just do it really well. And they're like, what? But Annette's shaking her head, because it's like, if you had that young lady come in and say, I'll do whatever you want, boss, tell me.
It's so true. Situational learning. Is someone coachable and back to curiosity? And because, yes, the textbook learning, it doesn't have any application until you're in it. I mean, I even see that just trying to teach current employees a new software. Until they can get in there and start, it's not going to stick. So, yes, the real life, it has to be married. You need the foundation of excellence and cerebral knowledge, and then you need that practical application, and then they get the aha moments.
On that note, thank you so much.
All right, David, we're back in our podcast studio, and this is the second podcast this month to reference Jennifer Lopez's movie, The Wedding Planner. Maybe I need to rewatch it. But seriously, though, were you surprised to hear about the impact of pop culture on people's choice to enter the industry?
It is interesting. It's also interesting that, yes, we talk about career paths, but many of the big investments in our industry started with an entrepreneur that went to a wedding and saw all these problems and started a tech company based on it too. So there's all sorts of ramifications when people sort of seeing how they can rethink the processes of even a face-to-face event.
Right. And a key insight for me from this conversation was that the planners who are going to be left behind are the ones who just focus on logistics. So strategy is the key here. You need to be asking, why are we doing this?
And I have been hearing that everywhere I've gone for the last year, 2 years, probably 3 years. What I'm curious to see is how we transition to making that shift. I mean, everyone's talking about it, but are people doing it?
Right. Carl and Annette also gave a pep talk on ambition and its cousin, curiosity. And in a conversation about careers, that's really valuable for anybody to hear. It's keep pushing, keep asking questions, and realize that someone has these amazing jobs, and it could be you.
Yep. And we're also, I keep telling people, we're in one of the most amazing industries in the world because we connect people. We may not get our due, but what we're doing is really important.
Well said.
So, Beth, what's going on at BizBash?
We have big news. We are expanding our top 100 franchise to Vancouver, and the inaugural list of the top 100 events in Vancouver debuts this week. We worked with Vancouver-based writer Kathleen Frymond to compile this list of trade and consumer shows, benefits, food and wine events, and more. Vancouver is a great city for events, so please check out the list at bizbash.com.
I think a lot of times people don't realize that we put these top 100 lists together, and no one else has been doing it. It really gives you a snapshot of what annual events are really the character of a city. Yes, we can do the big national ones, but getting down to a local level is really important, in my opinion.
It's not easy, but we
put a lot of judgment. It's art and science.
Art and science. We put a lot of work into it, so we're excited to be debuting that this week.
So before we end, I want to bring up one other topic which I haven't brought up, and I've been getting a lot of emails lately from people that want to actually advertise on our podcast. So if you're interested in it, let me know. We have all these other options. You can reach me at my email address, dadler@bizbash.com. And it was unexpected to get all these just sort of things coming in the mail. So if you're interested, we're reaching a great audience of people that are very engaged with what we do and love our business. So before we end, though, we do like to thank the people that were involved in the podcast. Claire Hoffman, who handles all of our editorial duties, Rebecca Pappas, who distributes it and gets it out to you, and of course, Dave Nelson, who is our producer. So what do we say at the end here, Beth?
Gather on.
Gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter @GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on.